Even though the first Sly Cooper didn't do big numbers like Ratchet & Clank or Jak and Daxter, it wasn't long before he was accepted as an unofficial, official Sony mascot alongside them. All three of these guys had a trilogy of games on the PS2, and even Ratchet himself thought Sly was pretty cool, cause here he is playing the game and going commando. This must have been the first place I had ever seen Sly, but I had no clue who he was at the time. Still, the world wouldn't have to wait long for a sequel. 2 years after the first game, we got Sly 2: Band of Thieves. I did say I got into Sly with the third game, but Sly 2 was the first one in the series I ever laid eyes on. I was at someone's house and they were playing a mission in the second chapter, and I was very confused by it all. My brother and I later gave it a shot, and we didn't quite understand how Sly worked at first. Shortly after though, we would play Sly 3, and we worked our way back to the second game. In my experience, video game sequels tend to do one of two things: refine and expand on what the first game did, or throw it all out the window for something completely different. And sometimes that turning point can define that series forevermore. That's been proven to work out great, but there's other times where you get a Jak 2 situation on your hands. Sly 2 takes a bit from column A and column B. It's still a lighthearted adventure for all ages, but everything got comfortably ramped up to 11. Story, gameplay, you name it. After beating Clockwork 2 years back, the threat of his return is greater than ever. Currently, his parts are scattered across the world in the possession of a group called the Claw Gang. Before someone gets the idea of putting the old bird back together, it's up to the Cooper gang to put a stop to the madness once and for all. And even as someone who hadn't played the first game yet, that opening cutscene had me hooked. I haven't seen this Clockwork guy in action, but you know what? I don't think I want to. The most apparent change from Sly 1 is how much more open this sequel is. Every chapter gives you one big overworld to explore, 8 in total, and think of them as your own personal jungle gym. Alongside Sly, Bentley and Murray are fully playable now, with each character having their own unique playstyle. They play so different from one another, you really have to think about how they're going to make it out there in the field. Bentley's the most fragile, but has all sorts of weird gadgets. Murray's not very agile, but has strength to spare. And Sly is a jack of all trades, but he can travel just about anywhere. When you're Sly, that's when the world truly becomes a playground. There's so many places to hide out of sight and never just one way to get somewhere. For Bentley and Murray, you might have to get a bit creative to get them someplace, but it's never impossible. I like how levels force you to learn them inside out like that, and getting to a mission is always a little different than the last time. After playing Sly 1 so much, I was worried there might be some whiplash jumping into these worlds again, but I settled back in just fine. As always, there were times where I'd put off a mission, get sidetracked during one, or sometimes I wouldn't have a mission at all. These worlds are just fun to run around in, fighting and pickpocketing guards, stealing treasures to take back to the safe house, and even looking for clue bottles. I previously mentioned they're harder to find here than in Sly 1, but as you're discovering all the nooks and crannies of a world, you're bound to find a fair bit of them. And by the time you've gotten 15 or so, you think, I bet I could find them all if I really tried. Back in the day, I managed to do it with nothing but my detective skills, listening for any faint clinking noises, and it felt great to be able to say, yeah dude, I beat Sly 2 100%, no big deal. Sly 2 is also twice as long as the first game. Typically, it'd take me 60 to 90 minutes to finish a chapter, and save for the first and last bosses, members of the Claw Gang get 2 chapters devoted to them. While cool in practice, some of them can feel a little dragged out. They freshen it up a bit by taking you to different locales, like Rajan's first chapter being in an Indian palace, and the second in the depths of a jungle. For the Contessa's levels, Prague is cool, being a gothic town full of crypts, spider webs, and all kinds of spooky stuff. But by the time I was wrapping things up in her second chapter, I was more than ready to move on. It's not so bad when you know where to go, but if you take things slow, you will be looking at similar backdrops for a while. Chapters 1 and 8 almost get lost in the mix since they're one and done, but I see them as a great way of easing you in and out of the adventure. And for the last world, it's funny. I played Crash Team Racing years after Sly, and when I got to the Hot Air Skyway track, I instantly thought, dude, this just looks like Arpeggio's blimp. Someone tell me I'm not alone here. Now, let me talk about the element of stealth. Stealth changes how you play much more than in the first game. With guards around every corner, you can make things easier or harder for yourself. It all depends on how you want to play. Most times though, I wanted to see just how elusive I could be and would try to do whole missions without killing a single guard. Unless of course that's what the mission asked for in the first place, in which case I would have no choice, now would I? Your stealthiness also gets put to the test against the Claw Gang, where you'll get up close and personal with them a number of times. You'll listen in on their conversations, raid their homes, steal stuff from right under their noses, and yes, things can get a little too close for comfort, like the mission where you lure Rajan to watermelons laced with sleeping darts and steal blueprints from him before he wakes up and kills ya. Doesn't matter how many times I've played this, I always get worried he'll see me, because if you attract too much attention, he'll find you no matter where you are. Later, when stealing keys from the Contessa, as if she wasn't scary enough, the first time trying to take out her guards without her catching on gave me a feeling of pure terror in the pit of my stomach. Regular mooks are nothing to sneeze at either. In Sly 1, they all died with one hit, but these guys take several, and if you're playing as Sly or especially Bentley, fighting them head on is a terrible idea. Funny story, I was doing this mission in Rajan's palace, and seeing all these guards when I got in the room, my brother and I went, "Oh god," at the same time. Even the weakest guards will sound the alarms when they see you, and if you're out of range but still in their vision, they throw rocks at you to chip away at your health. I can't even be mad, I'm just impressed how far these guys will go. Sly brings out a kind of fun I don't feel with many other games. We've all envisioned having superhuman abilities like a secret agent or a ninja, or how fun it would be if we could turn invisible. And I know there's games that do that, but Sly scratches that itch like nothing else for me. Sly's presentation has seen another huge jump, most evident with the insane amount of cutscenes. The comic book style cutscenes have seen a big upgrade, but the ones done in-game have more limited movement than in Sly 1. For more specific moments, you might have to use your imagination to fill in some missing holes. If I had to guess, I'd say that's because there's a lot more character interactions here than before, but I never thought it looked cheap or bad. Each character has a set of poses they cycle through, and it has a certain rustic charm to it. I've played these games so much, I know these poses by heart, and when talking Sly with Sly fans, I think we all do some of these poses in our heads from time to time. But they get the job done, and coupled with a few camera tricks, good lip sync, and even better voice acting, it's something I've never really thought about in the moment. If I may, I'd like to showcase some of the voices and faces of Sly 2 that left the most impact on me. Dimitri was another case of knew this guy from Sly 3, crazy to see him as a bad guy here, but he's just as fantastic as ever. In retrospect, Dimitri getting just one chapter is a crime in and of itself, but I'm glad he became such a breakout character. Life is always better with more Dimitri. Murray makes his debut as the Murray, but despite being voiced by the same guy as last time, his voice sounds much deeper here.
Well, I drove to this hot dog stand for a quick snack, and the next thing you know, I'm getting challenged to a race by these gangster dogs.
Greetings, citizen. I hope you weren't harmed by my meteoropic entrance.
It would change up again in the third game, where I think they nailed it, but here it sounds like Murray was pitched down from Chris Murphy's regular voice by just a tad. I still do like it though. Sly 2 starts the tradition of Carmelita getting a new voice with each game, and this one I'm not too fond of. She does alright most of the time, but during more dramatic scenes like when she's framed by Neela or being tortured by the Contessa, she kinda sounds mildly ticked off more than anything. It makes things come across a little sillier than they should for Carmelita.
I'll get you, Contessa.
Oh, how many times must you say that? It's not going to happen.
I'm dead serious. I'll get you.
I'll get you, I'll get you.
I mean it. I'll get you.
Yes, so I've heard.
Her actor, Elisa Gladwell, also pulls double time playing Neela, and this is a character I've always had very, very mixed feelings towards. She was interesting when the story first started, and later when she double-crossed the Cooper gang and Carmelita, but when she got in a position of power, she came off big time as a spoiled brat. Though it felt all the sweeter when things didn't go her way and she slowly lost her mind as the game went on. By the final chapter, we find out she was in cahoots with the Claw Gang the whole time, and in one last double cross, she kills Arpeggio and merges with Clockwork's body, and that's never sat right with me 100%. There's still a part of me that wants to see what Arpeggio would have done. He gets all this build up by the very end, we see him explain his plans, and then he just gets eaten. It's shocking, yes, but still a bit of a bummer. And I'm sorry, but the name Clockla, she clearly came up with that on the spot, and it just sucks all the tension out of the scene for me. Even Bentley here sounds like he's not too fond of the name either.
Neela has joined herself to the Clockwork frame, and the union has produced Clockla.
All that said, she does do something at the end of this game that's pretty nuts, but I'll get back to that later. Alright, now let's talk about the Cooper gang, finally. This is the close-knit group of friends I fell in love with, a ragtag crew that have each other's backs through thick and thin. All three have their moments to shine and their own character arcs, but I always secretly saw this as Bentley's game. Newcomers may see him as the weakest of the crew, but his technological know-how more than makes up for any physical strength. And in case you still had your doubts, his resolve is put to the test by the game's midpoint during the jailbreak chapter. You're dropped in what is basically Gotham City with creatures lurking the streets, your buddies locked up in jail, and it's up to you to save them before it's too late. As Bentley said it himself, this was the true test of friendship. When I first got here and saw him all by himself in the safe house, I was genuinely freaked out. How on earth am I going to do this with just Bentley, I thought. But through his sharp wits, he manages to hold his own, and by the chapter's end, I had a newfound respect not just for him, but for the whole crew. Once again pulling off the impossible and becoming ever closer during one of their darkest hours. Murray even lets Bentley drive the van, and man, that gets me every time. Now this game's got a lot of cool moments, but I wouldn't forgive myself if I didn't devote a whole segment to Canada. When putting this thing together, I had a bullet point that just said Canada in all caps. This has always been the high point of the game for me, and not just because I'm Canadian myself. See, where the chapters right before were dark and rainy with lots of large buildings and little sub-areas, here things are more laid back and laid out, and it's a great palate cleanser. Finding the clue bottles here was a relative breeze, and were the first places I got all 30. But Canada's also the most fun place to mess around in, specifically in Chapter 6. There were times I'd go here just to ride the spice trains or lure enemies onto the tracks to get hit by the trains. The stuff you pickpocket here were always my favorite too. Rubies, sapphires, gold bars, topaz, that's awesome. But I always loved trying my might against the grizzly bears. It was even more fun when you brought the bears into town and they started fighting the guards, and there's that truck that unloads 3 duck enemies, so you're guaranteed to see some madness. I love this roaring animation they do too. It almost looks like they should be surfing, and the grizzly cubs are just so cute when they do it. Carmelita's also lurking about here, and you can get her to chase you, go after the bears, fight the bad guys, you can pickpocket her. It's so much fun! Jean Bisson can be found here too, and if you head into his cabin after his mission, he'll still be there and you can even take him on. You'll never win, but it's cool fighting a boss outside of a regular fight. Chapter 7 has some sawmills laying around, and a long time ago, I discovered that if you brought a duck guard over to one of them, you could do this, and it had me in stitches. These chapters do have their slow spots, but it all ends off strong because it's got the Canada Games, baby! Every Sly chapter is posed off like an episode of an animated series, but this operation felt like a full-blown special episode. The whole gang has to put their lumberjack skills to the test, but they also have to cheat if they're gonna win the Clockwork Talons. The judges, however, are terrified of Bisson, giving him perfect 10s regardless of performance. So the gang soon takes them out and pose as the judges themselves. Just when you think everything's going to wrap up nicely, Bisson blindsides everybody, and when they come to, all their hard work up to this point has been undone. Then in another wild twist, the one to take on Big Bad Gene Bison is Bentley. When the two of them were having that exchange, I thought, don't tell me Bentley's gonna take him on, it's gonna be Murray, right? To my surprise, Bentley took him out without even lifting a finger, and this is hands down my favorite boss in the game. A few good lines from this fight have stuck with me in the years since too. I'm a particular fan of Sizzle is Gizzle and Sly's Wabam! Here I thought Bentley's time to shine was behind us, but it's just another reminder of his importance to the crew. Now remember, I came into Sly 2 after Sly 3, and in that game, Bentley was in a wheelchair. I was surprised seeing him here with full use of his legs, but I was more curious and worried as to how and when disaster would strike. During the Chapter 5 operation, when Bentley's blimp went down in a fiery explosion, I thought for sure that was what did it. It sounded so serious, but he got out of that without a scratch. That's when I knew it was going to be much worse. So fast forward to the final chapter, and I'm feeling pretty good. Everyone pulled off some crazy jobs, Carmelita came in to help again, and Clockla was down for the count. But to truly finish her off, we needed to get that hate chip, and that's when I got really anxious. I didn't want to go in there. And that's when her beak came slamming down, and my brother and I were left speechless. I can't think of many games with cute and cuddly characters where one of the main cast permanently loses use of their legs. I'm not looking down on things that don't go to these places, but Sly reminded me how you can get emotionally invested in just about anything. I was sad seeing Murray getting separated from his van, but this is on another level. And the fact it happened to a green cartoon turtle doesn't take away from the moment at all. This is someone you've seen grow and evolve throughout the adventure, and every time I think of this moment, it's heartbreaking. The next time I played Sly 3, I saw everything in a whole new light. Crazy stuff. Just like the other Sly games, I can play this over and over again, but there's one thing about it that's always baffled me. For some reason, this is the only game out of the 4 where you can't replay missions whenever you wish. There have been times where I'd purposely botch a mission or boss fight because that would be my only chance to play it until I started a new save file. And this really sucks if you're recording footage for the game and need something specific. What's that? You forgot to hit record? Well, better luck next playthrough, I guess. I was making my way through chapter 4 and thought I was getting great stuff, but when I went to stop the recording, imagine my shock to find I didn't even hit record. I seriously thought about playing the game over again for a second, but I just can't do that. That's too much time. But on a pseudo bright side, there are cheat codes that let you skip to any chapter you want, and that means I can show off this! After playing Sly 2, you will believe a turtle can fly. That's really all I wanted to show. That's like one of my favorite glitches. And would you look at that, when I first booted this up, all my save files were wiped because Sly Collection. Again, if you just want to play the game, this'll do you fine, but I gotta tell you, it's not a complete package. Where the first game had most of its original extras, depending on how you bought it, Sly 2's are more pick and choose. The PS2 version had this police badge emblem where if you hit the square button, you'd see some cool extras like tie-in promos, commercials, and a making of from the game's cast and crew. In the collection, you get the Sly 2 bonus video, the credits, and nothing else. This wouldn't be so bad if the emblems for the other episodes weren't still here. Clicking them just boots you back to the main menu, like the game is saying, haha, you thought you were gonna get something, screw you, buddy. Also, there's a snippet of Bentley gambling that's been cut from one of the cutscenes. Not too earth-shattering, just making that known. This version still has the cameos of JoJo and Rocket from Sucker Punch's Robot on Wheels, and the cheat code to turn Sly's alarm clock into Tom from Toonami is still here too, and that was an even bigger shock. How did this tie-in from a then-defunct Cartoon Network block manage to stay in here, but Sucker Punch's own stuff didn't? Maybe something to do with rights, but why does the first game have everything in it? Ugh, this collection! I love it for the HD upscale and everything, but it is a headache. Amidst all that stuff, I still had a blast playing Sly 2 again for what I'm sure is my 50 millionth playthrough. It's a sequel that doubles down on everything from the first game, but never feels overwhelming. It does everything you'd want and expect out of a sequel, and gives you stuff you never knew you needed. When talking about the best 2s in gaming, this will always be one of the greatest in my book. But next time, we'll be covering the third game, my first true exposure to a Sly Cooper story. So be sure to tune in next time as we cover Sly 3: Honor Among Thieves, as the Cooper Marathon continues.
I'll be seeing you soon, Ringtail.
Hey there folks, thanks for watching. I really hope you enjoyed what you saw. If you did, feel free to give this video a like, share with a friend, subscribe, check out my social media pages, my Patreon page where I got behind the scenes stuff and blogs and things like that, all that stuff that I always ramble on about. And what are some of your memories with Sly 2: Band of Thieves? Feel free to share them with me in the comments below. I really hope I'm not the only one who likes the phrase sizzle is gizzle. Come on, there's gotta be someone out there who likes that too. And while you're here, feel free to check out some of the videos I got on screen right here. I enjoyed making them, hopefully you'll enjoy watching them. And with all that said, I will see you guys next time. Later.